What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Front Yard Frontline. It's been a little bit of a break for me. I'll get into that, I'm sure, at a later date, but I'm glad that you're watching. And today is March 6th, 2022. Today is the 10th anniversary of the murder of Martin Angel Hernandez at the hands of the Anaheim Police Department back in 2012. There was a really good article that came out today in the Orange Juice blog that I'll share on my page that really goes into the details regarding Martin's murder and the aftermath and everything that happened. I'm really grateful for Vern for writing that, so I don't really want to rehash too much of that. As we were talking this morning and reminiscing about everything we've been through over the last 10 years, we started talking about the fallout around Martin's civil case. And if you've heard any of my commentary in the past or seen any of the things that I've written about attorneys, that's pretty much what I want to focus on today. Was the way that Martin's civil rights case was handled, or mishandled is what I should really say. So flashback 10 years after Martin was killed. One of the things that I did write about briefly, I was over here in Hollydale protesting and advocating for justice for my friend Michael Nida, who had been murdered in October 2011. We had a great march in January. I had some people from Anaheim come. My good friend now my good friend Bose Beleni came and told me that I needed to come to Anaheim and see what was happening in Anaheim. And I would find a lot of friends and allies there, which I did. This was in January of 2012, before Martin's murder. So we flash forward to March, on the night that he was killed. I started seeing stories and started seeing people sharing stories about what had happened that night. And one of the things that struck me right away was the instantaneous uprising of his community to defend his name, to try to get the truth out there about what had really happened to Martin, because the narrative that the Anaheim Police Department shared was obviously, put themselves in a hero role and really distorted the facts around the circumstances of Martin's murder. And the more that we talked to people who saw what happened, they actually manipulated the murder scene, the crime scene, to make it more in line with what they had said had happened. Their initial excuse for killing Martin was that he was armed, that there was a potential hostage in the way, and that the officer who killed Martin acted like a hero, right? That turned out to be complete bullshit. And his community rose up that night and the next couple nights to make sure that that story wasn't the only story told. Their account of what happened was that Martin, who happened to be armed at the time because of a previous encounter, which is in the article, threw his weapon over a fence, put his hands up, got on his knees, and surrendered to the officer. A lot of people told us Martin died laughing because he said, "Dispensa, you got me," as if to say, hey, you know what I mean? I don't have a weapon. And the officer who killed him just basically executed him on his knees. And then they went and retrieved the weapon from the other side of the fence. They manipulated Martin's body to make it seem more like, he was in a firing position as opposed to being on his knees. But the evidence at the time, because they did alter the entire scene later on for Disney, Martin was killed within a mile of Disneyland. And they remodeled that entire area as an off-ramp, diamond-laned off-ramp for people to go straight to Disneyland without having to pass through any of the dangerous neighborhoods of Anaheim. So that all that evidence in that scene is completely gone, but the trajectory of the bullets were at a downward angle, which was more in line with somebody who was at a lower, on his knees, surrendering. All that evidence, like I said, was destroyed. But there was a window of opportunity for a diligent attorney to go in and take pictures, to collect evidence, to collect narratives, to establish an alternative timeline to what the APD was saying, and that never happened. The only people that ever went out and tried to find out what was going on was Martin's family, was Sonia, was the handful of friends who were committed to finding out and to telling the truth about what really happened to Martin. Sonia's family did retain counsel, and I can remember when we first started spending our time together, she would tell me, I haven't heard from the lawyer. No one's heard from the lawyer. And in fact, it wasn't until July when Manuel Diaz and Joey Acevedo were killed back to back that Sonia's lawyers started calling. Started talking about Martin's case and how Martin, how they're committed to Martin's case and how, they're going to do everything they can to make sure that this young man gets justice. And we were thinking, well, it's weird because it's almost 6 months later and how are you guys going to find evidence? What are you guys going to, you guys haven't done anything. And in fact, the investigator for the firm that Sonia's family retained actually told Sonia to go out there and do some footwork, to go out there and collect evidence, to go out there and investigate. So the private investigator, again in quotes, for the firm that Sonia's family retained wanted Sonia to go out and investigate, to go out and find the truth, which I thought was weird and we thought was weird at the time. So, like I said, he was also seemed a lot more interested in our relationships with the other two families who had been affected in July, the family of Manuel Diaz and the family of Joel Acevedo. They were much more interested in connecting this firm with those families than they were in finding out what happened to Martin Hernandez on the night he died. So we fast forward, and we go, I'd say about a year, maybe a year and a half into the future when we're doing depositions now for Martin's case. Okay. Now remember, what we had learned from his community on the night he died was that Martin surrendered, that Martin was unarmed, that Martin was compliant with the officer when he was executed. Okay. So we go into depositions, and the first person to be deposed, or the first deposition of note for us, was the potential hostage, who during her deposition admitted that she never saw Martin with a gun. She never felt like she was in danger. Okay. That she was out of the line of fire. That she was obviously aware of what was happening around her, but that when she looked at Martin, he was unarmed, which was a huge, huge revelation, right? An official revelation. Again, one we already knew, but one that the APD had vehemently denied. And like I said, had even gotten to the point of altering a crime scene to line it up more with their narrative, right? So Sonia's in the elevator with the attorney, who then turns to her and tells her, with tears in his eyes, "Wow, Martin really was murdered, huh?" And we think, it just floored her, right? That her attorney, 2 years later, has finally come to the realization that her client was murdered, right? Or that his client was murdered. Kind of floored everybody, but we were so happy to have the narrative of the community reinforced by the testimony of a directly impacted party, right? That we just kind of kept our fingers crossed and said, okay, well, this is really good. When we go to court, we can get this officer on the stand and we can tie him up in knots, right? Obviously, there's got to be some other evidence. There's got to be something that this lawyer has that is going to help, advance this case. But we also saw a change in the demeanor of the legal team, right? Almost like a panic. And later on, when I started working for an attorney myself, and I started to find out what the process is with a civil case, we realized that they probably felt like we're going to trial now, and they were not prepared. They had no evidence ready. They had, like I said, no witnesses interviewed. If you remember what I just said, they were expecting Sonia, who was who was crushed by the death of her brother, was also trying to keep her family together, take care of her beautiful young daughter, and just keep her head above water. Then they wanted her to go do the professional work of a legal private investigator. So that told us they had nothing. They had no evidence. They didn't have any truth or facts at all. So through the Young Survivors, which was an organization that we founded to help the children who have been impacted by police brutality, there was another attorney who this legal team hired to just basically do paperwork, paralegal work. And they had kept telling us, you know what, okay, the summary judgment hearing is coming up. You know, this is where they're going to determine whether we have enough evidence to go to trial. And I sincerely believe, and I'll say this is my belief based on what I saw at the time, that this legal team really felt like we were going to lose the summary judgment because they didn't have any evidence other than the testimony that directly refuted the narrative of the APD. So they hired this other attorney who I don't think that they took very seriously, which was their mistake. He happened to just basically fall in love with our community. Went to work really hard, interviewing people that he could, the people that were still willing to talk 2 years later. And he wrote an excellent argument against the summary judgment for the Anaheim Police Department. Lo and behold, we won. The Civil Court of California, or whatever, you know, they decided that there was enough evidence to go forward with the trial for the charges that which included, you know, Dan Hurtado denying medical care to somebody who he had just shot, which is something you're supposed to do every time you're supposed to get an ambulance in there. Instead, they let Martin die before they brought somebody in to try to save him. Because if Martin had lived to tell his story, it would be completely different than the one that got told in the newspapers. So, Antonio Salazar, God bless you. You wrote an excellent summary judgment argument. We won that. Now we're going to court. Now we're going to trial, right? And this is where things get really sleazy. Because if a settlement attorney takes your case, they don't do any investigating. They don't do any work because their whole plan is to settle the case out of court, right? Before they ever even have to appear before a jury or a judge or the adversary on the other side of the arena, right? They're just going to cash that check and they're going to take it home. They're going to split it with the family and tell them, I did my best. Be happy with what you got, right? But the last thing they're going to do is they're going to spend any kind of their own money, right, to balance out against something that there's just pretty much a done deal, a settlement. Now, what they didn't understand was that Martin's family didn't want to settle. Martin's family wanted to hear that officer on the stand. They wanted the truth out there, right? They were disgusted by the lies that were told surrounding his death and the way that his murder was just kind of put to the back pages. And so they wanted a trial. They wanted testimony. So now if you're an attorney with no evidence, with no paperwork filed in the case, I have Martin's case paperwork, and it's very thin compared to some of the other cases that I've worked on. Okay? So if you're completely unprepared to go to trial because you thought you would be taking a settlement, what do you do next? Well, it's up to the family, correct? So then you start harassing the family. Then you start manipulating one party against the other to get them to take a settlement, which this firm has done repeatedly. Okay? I have had calls from other families represented by these lawyers who have accused them of destroying the family over settlement arguments, right? People who want to go to court and want to have that story told versus people who want to get paid right now. And the attorneys orchestrate that and manipulate them against each other. And they don't care once they're paid what happens to your family because they're never going to see you again. The difference between those families and Sonia's is that Sonia's active in the community. She is an advocate for a lot of other families, right? Her word carries far and wide. So he had to figure out a way to get this case to go away before he was exposed for being a charlatan, a settlement attorney. So what he did is he started making veiled threats, veiled implications that Sonia's family, if we lose the case, City of Anaheim can sue you for up to $40,000. Do you have $40,000 to pay them? Because if you lose this case, it's going to be up to you. Okay, we can't help you with that. So if you really, really, really want to go to court, I would suggest having some money ready because if we lose this case, which I don't think we will, right? But if we lose this case, you're going to bear the financial burden, right? Are you sure you really want to do this? Meanwhile, writing to Sonia, telling Sonia, hey, you need to talk to your family I'm really worried about their well-being and their mental health. I don't think that they can handle this. If this case goes to court, I don't think that they can, that they're going to be able to face the facts. And, I'm really worried about their mental health. Not realizing that Sonia and her family are speaking to each other every day, right? Trying to play off the fact that they perceived that there was a rift between the family, not realizing that it had already been dealt with and that Sonia and her family were speaking, were sharing stories, right? I have emails from both sent to Sonia and sent to Sonia's family, right? Regarding the same situation, two totally different stories, right? On the one hand, you're going to have to pay for everything. If we lose, you're going to have to pay for everything. And talking to Sonia is, hey, you better, try to talk your family out of pursuing this case because I'm really worried about what's going to happen to them when they go to court, right? The common factor is that there is no evidence presented by this attorney in defense or in the name of Martin, other than the depositions, which were the reason why Anaheim lost the summary judgment, because the depositions were glaring, right? Discrepancies between the narrative of the APD and the testimony of the witnesses, okay, which they did not expect. Remember, Martin really was murdered, right? They didn't expect that. They didn't expect Sonia to be telling the truth. They didn't expect, that the entire community that saw what happened that night would have the courage to stand up and say, that's not what happened. Okay? So, long story short, the family decided not to pursue the case in a court of law. This dude gets off the hook, right? And that's when we found out. That's when we started to get, like I said, the argument for against summary judgment. That's when I happened to go to work and was able to access the filings in the case of Martin Angel Hernandez versus the Anaheim Police Department. And I saw there was nothing filed. There was hardly anything filed compared to what the attorney I was working for would file in the case from day one. So there was never any intention to go to court on this case. In fact, the only time that they ever really took an interest in Sonia was when Sonia could connect them with other cases that had a better potential for earnings, that had a better potential to make more money. Okay? And like I said, as we worked with the young survivors, I had these same attorneys come up in conversations with other families who had retained them, acting the same way, breaking up families, turning mothers and fathers against brothers and sisters, right? All over settlement money. So if you've seen my postings recently about attorneys and what an attorney can do for you or what an attorney cannot do for you, okay, it's because of the family of Martin Hernandez, the memory of Martin Hernandez, and the truth about what really happened to Martin Hernandez have been weighing heavy on my heart, okay? Weighing heavy on my heart. And I feel like I said, if you go and you read the Orange Juice blog, that'll pretty much tell you what happened to Martin on the night he died and how it was connected to everything else that happened in Anaheim in 2012. Okay, but only we can tell you what happened to us as a family. Okay, only we can tell you, and especially Sonia and I, as members of the young survivors who've worked with other families, can tell you that this is a repeated offense. And it's not just this particular attorney I'm talking about. I'm sure that this happens quite a bit all around the country. Because what I've learned is that when we share these stories with other impacted families, they've got one of their own. Or they know somebody that they work with who's got one of their own. Okay? So today, on the 10th anniversary of the murder of Martin Hernandez, we know for a fact that he was executed. Okay? We know because of the testimony. We know because of the lies that the APD told. If it didn't happen that way, they wouldn't have had to change their story. Okay? We know what happened to Martin. But the one thing that Martin's family, that Sonia would have wanted more than anything in the world, was to have that officer on the stand squirming like the pig he is, having to justify what he did to her brother. And she never got that day in court because attorneys, more often than not, only care about the money that they can make off of your pain. And once that's all said and done, you'll never see them again. So why should they care about you and your family? So when they come to your doorstep, when they come to your family, when they come to your protests, when they come to the organizations that are supporting your protests and they tell you, I was I come from the streets too. I was just like you, but I made something of myself. You know what? The fact of the matter is, what they did was pursue a road that made them rich and then took them away from all of us. So even if they come from our communities, trust me, if they're driving a fucking nice car, if they're driving an import, if they're driving a Porsche or a Ferrari, they're not part of this community anymore. And they don't look at you like part of their community. Because if the attorney that represented Martin Hernandez actually followed through with the way he spoke, we would have already had our day in court. But instead, they pursued the money path and didn't care what happened to the truth or the family in the aftermath. All right? So that's my story today. Like I said, I'm sorry that I haven't been posting like I said I would. My father passed away in January, and I'm grieving. My father was a humble, great man, and his loss in my life has created a huge crater that I'm trying to crawl out of. But I knew I had to get on camera today and talk to you all about Martin Hernandez. All right? So today, please say a prayer. Please light a candle. Please remember the name of Martin Angel Hernandez in your meditations and your prayers. And if you happen to be a family that's being represented by an attorney that's promising you the world, all I can tell you is make sure they're doing their work. Tell them you want to see everything they've done so far. Don't let them off the hook. Don't let them put you on the back burner. Don't let them tell you that it's your responsibility to go out and find evidence. Because you know what? The guy that I worked for, he had no problem spending whatever he had to get the best private investigating attorneys or firm that he could get to find out everything about every circumstance surrounding every case he tries, settlement or not. Okay? Make sure that they're spending. Make sure that they're investing in your case. Make sure that they're filing in your case. Make sure that they're doing the work, okay? And they're not just talking the talk. Make sure they walk that walk, all right? Justice for Martin Angel Hernandez and all of the martyrs of police brutality across the country. Thank you for listening. Front Yard Frontline. We'll be back.